You need to know how to make crispy steak bites, the perfect appetizer for any occasion or a different way to serve steak for dinner. So follow me and let's turn up the tasty. Today we're gonna make crispy steak bites, which is a great way to turn up the tasty right at home and really transform a cut of steak and cook it differently than you typically would on the grill or on the stove. Starting with this sirloin steak. Now you can use a lot of different cuts of steak for this technique, even tough cuts like top or bottom round. I'm using the sirloin because I had it around the house. The first thing you want to do is cut it into strips, right? And you want to cut against the grain. So because this is a sirloin steak and the grain can kind of like change depending upon what part of the steak you're using, I'm gonna cut it into pieces. But as you can see, there's the grains right there. They're running that way. So when I cut, I'm actually going to cut that way, right? And I like to keep them about a ½ inch thick. That's probably, similar to what you'd see with stir fry, but with stir fry, it gets a little too thin. I want to be able to taste that meat when I bite into it. See right there. As you can see, that's a little thicker than what you'd typically see with stir fry. About a ½ inch, maybe a third of an inch. It's hard to tell, but right, like so. So this piece is going to be a little too long. These longer pieces, I'm just going to cut in half. Makes them easier to handle later in the cooking process. Throw those in the bowl right here. Now we're gonna have some tough sinewy pieces like this. I'm not gonna be able to eat that, so I'm just gonna go ahead and cut around that. That's gonna feel like bubble gum in your mouth, and that's no good when you're trying to, as you go through your meal, thinking you're gonna have a nice tender piece of meat, and you get that. So I just go ahead and get rid of that. This is a little too wide. I'm gonna go ahead and cut this down the middle and put it into more manageable pieces. All right, now I have this all cut up into chunks. We're gonna get it ready for the next part of the process. We have 1 tablespoon of cornstarch right here and 1 egg. We're only going to use the egg white as well as some Worcestershire sauce, Worcestershire sauce.
Italian seasoning.
I like to call it tasty. It goes really well with beef. It promotes a nice beefy flavor. Now, the interesting thing about this method is that it's a method that's typically used in a lot of Chinese and Asian cooking, typically referred to as velveting the meat, right? And that is going to promote a nice, tender, moist cut of meat.
You can hardly swallow it. You want it to be a bit moist.
Ugh, don't say that word.
What word?
Oh, moist. As it goes through the stir fry process. See, a lot of those restaurants, they're gonna use lower end cuts of meat like top or bottom round. Even though I'm using sirloin, I like this method because it keeps that steak nice and juicy as it cooks. When you go to cook these thin strips, they're inevitably gonna cook to a well done state. It's going to be almost impossible to cook them medium rare. But this technique will allow them to stay nice and moist and also crispy as you bite into them. But go ahead and experiment. You can use a lot of different types of meat. Heck, you can even use this method as a basis to make like your favorite Asian dishes, like a Mongolian beef or something like that.
Don't just sit there and stare at your beef. Don't go like that. There's major difference between stir fry and stir fry.
First thing, I'm gonna go ahead and get this cornstarch, 1 tablespoon. Oh, I should mention this is 1 pound of meat. 1 tablespoon cornstarch, 1 pound of meat. Here we have the egg, and we're just going to get that egg white. Hopefully I can do it, right? You just kind of toss it back and forth like this. I'm sure if you're a baker or around anyone that bakes, you've seen this method to extract only the egg white. We're gonna leave the yolk. Next, I just pretty much eyeball this right here, but I'm looking for about a tablespoon of Worcestershire sauce. Again, that will give it a nice beefy flavor. From here, I'm gonna go ahead and get on the glove and get this mixed up. So now we're just gonna go ahead and get this all thoroughly coated and mixed up in here. I like to wear this glove because it can be a little bit messy, like anytime we're working with a starch and egg. It can stick to your fingers a lot. This is just a lot cleaner. All right, and that's why it's called velveting meat. You can see it has a real velvety type of texture to it. It doesn't look too appealing right now, but I promise you, it tastes amazing. I'm gonna go ahead and let this sit in the fridge for about an hour, and I'll be right back. This meat has been sitting in the fridge for about an hour now. We're gonna get ready to cook it. Before we do, we're gonna make a a dredge before we drop it in the pan. We have 1/4 cup of flour right here. Actually, that was the cornstarch. 1/4 cup of cornstarch. This is 1/4 cup of flour. So all in all, we have a 1/2 cup. I have 1 tablespoon of kosher salt. I have a 1/2 tablespoon of garlic powder. I have a 1/2 tablespoon of black pepper. And I have a 1/2 tablespoon of paprika. Set this to the side, and we're just gonna go ahead and mix this up thoroughly. Get all that married together. Now, once that's done, set that to the side. We're going to bring over a skillet, and we have 3/4 cup of oil here that we're gonna dump in. I don't necessarily need to deep fry. You may be able to use less oil than this, but I find that this is about the right amount for 1 pound of beef. It's gonna take a little bit longer than fully submerging it, but one thing I don't like to have in the kitchen is a bunch of leftover oil. Like, what am I going to do with that? I'm probably not going to store it, so I'll just end up throwing it away. The next thing I wanna do is heat this to about a medium-high temperature and throw on my apron because there's gonna be some splatter. Okay, while you're waiting for your oil to get hot, you can take a few pieces out of here and mix it in. I don't do it all at once. It will clump up. Just a few pieces at a time and get those nice and coated right here in the dredge. There you go, something just like that right there. All right, here this is starting to bubble a little bit. Now, what you wanna do is see those bubbles when you drop it in. That's gonna help it get nice and crispy. If you're not sure, just grab a little piece and drop it in as a test, like this right here. What we're gonna do is just continue to drop those. I like to go clockwise around the pans. That way I can remember the order that I put them in. Now you're gonna have to flip them about halfway through the process. Seem to have found a good temperature here though. All right, we're rocking. All right, first batch is done. Now we're gonna go in with the second batch. And it is important, you don't want your oil to be too hot. It can pop, it can splatter more than you want it to, and that is no bueno.
This one, no bueno. This one, I'm confident.
Now, as these cook, it's important to note you're not really looking for any type of internal temperature. You'll be able to see it, but you'll also be able to feel it nice and crispy when you pull it off. If I had to give you a time, I mean, it really is gonna depend. I would say about 2 minutes about 2 minutes, 3 minutes per side. They're done cooking, and as you can see, I actually made it through the cook while having some remaining, and that doesn't always happen because these are tasty. They're a great way to serve a unique appetizer for the big game day or a different take on serving steak for dinner. I serve them up with a little bit of peanut sauce that's store-bought. You could use some teriyaki or make some yourself, but you know, most people aren't gonna have had anything like this. You're really gonna wow them. Try it at home. Let us know how you like it for yourselves. We'd love to hear from you in the comments below. I'll see you guys soon.